Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Grace Covenant Chats, brought to you by Grace Covenant Church here in Philadelphia. I am your host, Caleb Watt, here with maybe my most interesting guest yet, Caleb Watt. Caleb, how are you doing today? Hey, Caleb, I'm doing well. How are you? I'm good. Thanks for asking. But yeah, I mean, you're relatively new to staff, right? And I think a lot of people haven't seen you around before. So before we really get started with the interview, let me just ask the question, what do you actually do here at GCC? Like, what is your actual role here at GCC? That's a pretty good question because I think I get asked that a lot because, I don't think GCC has had a media person on staff before. And so basically for my role, we didn't even really have a name for it until like a few weeks ago at college retreat when I was asked by a lot of other people, like, what do you do? Because I was just holding a camera and I'm not a college student. But I think the official title that Pastor Doug has decided on is that I am the media associate. I think intern or staff implies different things here at GCC. So media associate makes a lot of sense. Not just an employee, although there was a joke among staff for a little bit. But basically what I do is I make these podcasts, I host these podcasts, and I'll do a lot of the videography at events, at Sunday services sometimes. I'll make the videos when they come out, like the promotional videos that, like for a college retreat or Pastor Doug's ordination video, stuff like that. And basically anything else that they really need me to do when it comes to multimedia things, but particularly in video. Oh, and I manage the YouTube channel and I do stuff with the thumbnails and stuff like that. So yeah, basically just multimedia things. And I'm only just part-time. I'm not full-time here on staff. So I do other things as well. So did you study videography and stuff like this in college? No, actually, I was a physics major at Penn. And again, I'm the youngest person on staff by, I think, a fairly wide margin because I just graduated last year in 2022. So, yeah, I guess life took a bit of a turn. God had other plans for me than physics. My passions went elsewhere, and I ended up here. Oh, that's interesting. Because yeah, physics and like video production and like stuff like that don't feel like they have a lot of overlap. So yeah, maybe that's where I want to start with some of our discussion is like, first, how did you find GCC? How did you get involved in GCC? Second, how did you get involved with serving at GCC maybe? And then third, how did you end up doing video, specifically when it's very different from what you maybe studied or thought that you were going to do with the rest? So like life story sort of things, my whole collegiate career. Yeah, whatever you want to share, and you don't have to share too much. But yeah, just whatever you're comfortable with, Caleb. All right. So how I found GCC. So before I got to Penn, I had a friend from high school actually who went to Renewal, but she had checked out GCC as well. And so I was doing Bible study with like a bunch of other friends at her house one day over the summer, and I asked her about churches and like fellowships, and she recommended GCC and Renewal because those were the two that she had checked out. And so when I got to college, when I started at Penn, GCC was the first church that I went to. I think I was in a bit of an interesting situation because before I got to Penn, I was already pretty certain that I was going to commit to an organization, a fellowship called Christian Union, which if you ask me about my college experience, you'll know probably that it's been a large part. It's where a lot of my development happened, and it's where a lot of my closest friends still are from to this day. But GCC and searching for a church as a result, I don't want to make it sound like it was like not important to me, but it was a lower priority in terms of like really doing my due diligence or like really checking out different churches and like trying things out and church hopping and stuff like that. Simply because I knew I was already committed to a fellowship. And so for church, instead, I was looking for community, right? I knew I was getting teaching and I was being poured into in other ways at this fellowship. But for church, I just wanted to be around Christians, around people who I could get along with, essentially. And, enjoy the Sunday service. Which maybe sounds a little bit consumeristic, but again, it's something that I didn't put too much thought into. Of course, I checked out a few other churches, but um, how I ended up getting into serving here at GCC, maybe that would be the next question that's good to answer. Is that I actually didn't serve at all in GCC until my senior year of college. And the reason being is because I was so involved in Christian Union. I was, doing Friday night stuff with them. I was doing sound for their Thursday night large groups. I was doing I was on their student exec team for a while, right? And all these other things with Christian Union just took a lot of my time. And so I decided pretty early on that I wouldn't serve at GCC simply because I don't have the bandwidth to, on top of being a student. And so what ended up happening was senior year, I got pulled into worship team by our very own Joey Zia, who will hopefully be on the podcast soon. Joey. And yeah, because worship is something that I've been involved in since I'd say high school. I've always done sound. I've always been an audio engineer, right? Mixed for youth groups, but then moved up and started doing other things. And so I was the sound guy for Christian Union, and now I'm more or less the sound guy for GCC. You've probably seen me in the back with a laptop mixing during Sunday services if you attend our church. But yeah, and then from there, I've just been on worship team. Worship team has been a huge blessing. Love everyone who's on it. And then from there, I somehow got offered this job. How I got into video, though, and stuff like that. So one of the things that for Christian Union that I did was I started a podcast because I was having a lot of great conversations with people over dinner and through meetups and stuff like that. And I was hearing a lot of testimonies and a lot of encouraging things. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be really cool if not only could I hear this, but it could be shared, right, with a lot of people in our community. And one of the things that I noticed too, right, is especially talking to a lot of the old student exec before me at Christian Union, which you'll, if you've been involved in Christian leadership or of any ministry, you'll probably have experienced some of this, which is that a lot of times people complain a lot about the decisions that you're making, and a lot of times people don't like what you're doing. But I found that even though I maybe had some of those sentiments towards the people who came before me, right? Maybe I disagreed with something and maybe I was a little bit more antsy or about it than I should have been. Once I actually started talking to them and realized what their heart was behind their actions and why they care about the ministry and how they're doing their best to serve God in this specific instance or through the specific season of life, it was much easier for me to then submit to their leadership, then agree maybe, or even agree to disagree, and really get behind their vision, I think, which is maybe one of the more important parts. And so I thought that would have been really cool. And so I started the podcast for Christian Union called the Faith in Action Podcast, which is no longer running, but it's just for the first season and a half, it was just all student testimonies essentially, and it was super cool. And I did it with my friend, who's my close friend Tommy, who's still very close to me now, and we got to hear a lot of cool stories. And so that's where I think my passion for multimedia started, at least in the church setting. Where video came in is because I started a YouTube channel a few years back. And so I think doing a video podcast and doing video production became, made a lot of sense. And so when GCC was looking to expand into that and, talking to P. Doug about it, talk to Joey about it, and it's and other people, it just seemed very opportune for me at the moment where I get to serve a community that's given me so much. I get to serve the church in a manner that's befitting to my passions, and it also has practical implications for me too, as I'm trying to figure out other things in my life, right? Other things that, in music and stuff like that for me personally, and in a time of transition. So I guess that was a pretty loaded question, but yeah, that would probably be my answer. Wow, that's pretty interesting. It sounds like life just went in a lot of different directions. From just being busy and stuff like that, to yeah, again, ending up in video, which is a very different, again, trajectory from physics, which a lot of times is like academia or like industry jobs. Um, what do you feel like is something that, yeah, is something that God has taught you through all this, right? As you're going through this process of like changes and transitions in your life, again, being a very young adult too, um, how do you feel like God is working in your life through all of this? That's a good question. Yeah, typically since I'm the one asking the questions, I get to ask the deep introspective things to all my guests and P Doug and stuff like that. But rarely do I get to um, think deeply on the mic, shall I say, in response to a question. I think one of the main things that God's been teaching me in this season is that He's still present. Um, this is a thought that's coming right off of our young adult retreat too. So shout outs to that and Pedro and the messages and stuff like that. But throughout college, my experience with faith was one thing, but once I started getting later in college and then through graduation to now, one of the things that I feel like has been a big struggle for me is just remembering and knowing that God is near. Um, and I think that even in reflecting upon that and looking at it now as you asked this question, Caleb, is that God has done a lot for me. I have tasted and seen that the Lord is good, and therefore I do long for pure spiritual milk, as Peter says in 1 Peter 2. And so it's very frustrating when God feels very distant and not near. But one of the things that I keep coming back to, or at least in my reflections and when I'm thinking, reading the Bible and stuff like that, is that God is a God who is one of memory, right? Like when he gives the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20, it's like, I'm the Lord your God, right, who brought you out of Egypt. So the first thing that happens is God tells him to remember what he has done. And I struggle with that a lot. I remember what God has done, and then it doesn't feel real, and then I don't want to, remember that or acknowledge that it's real anymore. But I think God has been very patient with me through this season in that He's reminded me a lot of what He's done in the past through my college career, through even stuff that happened in high school, how He brought me through high school, and things like that. It feels weird talking about high school when I know so many of our guests view that as a very, very far gone time, but I guess it's still within a decade for me. Not taking shots at our other guests, but yeah, it's just on top of that though, right? And on top of reminding me of what He's done, God has also continued to provide in small, subtle, unexpected ways. And I think even thinking about getting this job, having the opportunity to live here at MC, it was unexpected. I didn't ask for this. I didn't go out of my way to talk to the people who were involved in my hiring, like whether or not GCC needed this position filled. It was something that was just given to me, and like I don't know what I can describe that to other than just providence, right? Like even the means through which it happened. Like, why did I start meeting up with Joey and ask him for discipleship? Why did I feel that I needed that? And why did I join worship team? Why did I, so many questions about like why I did certain things or why certain things happened to me, where I almost can't answer with anything other than, but God orchestrated this, and God is doing work in my life, and God is still saying, "Hey, I'm near." Even when I feel distant, I am very close, and I'm very near. So, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I've been learning in this season. Wow, that's pretty profound, Caleb. Pretty cool how God is working. But thank you for sharing. I appreciate it a lot. But we are coming up against the end of our time here for today's episode, because again, you are just the part-time staffer, so you only get half the episode that everyone else does when they come on for an interview. But before we go, I do have some fun questions that the other members of staff recommended to me. And I would like to ask a few of this, if that's okay with you. Sure, go for it. I heard that you like making milk tea and you make a lot of fried rice. So what is your go-to recipes? What are your go-to recipes for both of those? Milk tea and fried rice. I guess I suppose it's how Cantonese I am. My Hong Kong roots. But for milk tea, my recipe is I like the tea strong, right? So, okay, first off, I'll caveat everything with I only have access. I don't go to Chinatown a lot. I don't like, and so a lot of the things that ingredients that I have access to come from a normal grocery store like Acme, right? So when I only have Lipton or like Twinings black tea, right? Maybe like 10 grams of tea for every cup, so 250 milliliters, right? Or maybe a little bit less if I don't want something as strong, right? So I'll boil that on the stovetop for 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'll drain it, whatever, and that's the tea. And then I basically just add sweetened condensed milk to taste, right, until it's sweet enough. And then I'll add evaporated milk until the mouthfeel is correct or the way that I want it, right? Because the sweetened condensed milk makes it very sweet, but then the evaporated milk just changes like the texture. And so I'll first sweeten it, right, so that it tastes good. And then I'll add, evaporated milk so that it, feels good in the mouth as well. For fried rice, unfortunately, I don't have a big burner. If you've been in MC, you'll know that our stovetops are not very good. But yeah, so I still make it a lot, right? And it's in a nonstick pan too. So unfortunately, it's not a wok, which is sad. So the temperatures don't get high enough for me to get the wok hay, but it's okay. It still works. It still tastes good. And so it's 2 chicken thighs, 2 to 4 chicken thighs, right? Need protein. 4 eggs, bell pepper, onions, and frozen vegetables. Sometimes the last 3 ingredients, right? If I have onions, if I have bell peppers, if I have frozen vegetables, and if I'm feeling extra fancy, right, then garlic, right? If I'm feeling like I want to do work, then finely diced. If not, then rough chop. And then, yeah, just the proteins first. Cook all those, then all vegetables on top, right? Once they're cooked through, take them out. Eggs, I like the quickly fried, like puffed eggs. So they should be scrambled. Put those in, and then rice in. Once they're starting to firm a little bit, and then like mix in the rice, then mix in everything else. Turn off the heat. Soy sauce, sesame oil, a little bit of salt to taste, right, if needed. Some black pepper. Boom. Easy fried rice. And you can clean, the best part about this is you can clean the dishes that you're using while you're waiting for the proteins and stuff to cook. So it's so efficient, and which is why I make it every day, essentially. Nice. Well, that's about all the time that we have for today's episode. Caleb, thank you again so much for coming on and sharing a little bit about your life and just some things on your mind. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, no problem. And again, we are Grace Covenant Church here in Philadelphia, bringing to you this episode of the Pod Chat, which has been a fun episode to film so far. Greatly enjoyed it. If you'd like to check us out and learn more about us, you can do so at philly.gracecovenant.net and join us on Sundays at Meyerson for Sunday services. And until next time, everybody, peace. That was a Waukie's outro. Right? Yeah, that was a Waukie's outro. All right.